Welcome to Athlete Complete, where we host raw and open conversations about the details that impact performance from current and former professional athletes for parents, players, coaches, and fans. What a great place to start, fellas. Let's kick this thing off. The way that I was thinking we would start this, for just a little bit of context, is have each of you guys introduce yourself, and when you're introducing yourself, give us some nicknames. What are some of every athlete that comes up playing sports gets, a number of nicknames. And so I want to get who are you? What do you do? And what were your nicknames growing up? And what are your nicknames now? Anybody can jump off.
I'll start. I'm James Paxton, pitcher for the LA Dodgers. I've had many nicknames, and it's been Pax for the longest time. Last name Paxton, so Pax. In college, my coach thought it was funny to call me Jimmy, so everybody started calling me Jimmy. And I've never been called Jimmy in my life before, except for that. So it's funny, like you get nicknames from like different times in your life. If you see somebody and they call you by a certain name, you're like, oh, I know you from that time in my life. So college was Jimmy. And then minor leagues was Pax, probably. I didn't get Big Maple until the big leagues. It was like my third year in the big leagues. My first base coach thought I needed a nickname. So I was like, all right, dude, come up with one. So he's coming up with different names, and like some of them suck. And then one day he's like, dude, I got it. It's Big Maple. And I was like, all right. Mm-hmm. So he tells my manager, and my manager says it in a post-game conference. I think I had pitched that night or something like that. And he called me Big Maple. And then the media just ran with it. And I was Big Maple since then.
Dude, Big Maple's awesome, actually.
It is a good one.
It's strong.
Especially with the associated tattoo. I mean,
this guy.
Yeah, the brand awareness is really high with you.
Yeah.
It'd be better if it was neck, so people
a little behind the ear, one of those.
I'm B-Rad Evans. Played Major League Soccer for 12 years. Nickname, I didn't even think about a nickname going back a long time, but I had a Brazilian coach, and he would call me Rebbit. And I think I was just hyper and would just fucking do anything and everything in practice, and I would never calm down, and so he called me Rebbit, and I don't know if he was saying rabbit or if he was saying like the sound of a frog. So it's up for interpretation. I think a little bit of both. So that actually stuck with me. That was my instant messenger name, my handle on AIM back in the day, Rebbit3. So that one stuck for a little while through high school, and then it just became B-Rad once Malibu's Most Wanted came out, and it was the easiest. And there was actually a guy from Portland who made a B-Rad shirt, and it said B-Rad, and then it had my face on it with sunglasses. And my wife at the time had seen it like at a game or like a photo online or something. And we made some T-shirts, and then they actually sold like hotcakes, and all the proceeds went to Seattle Children's Bend Town Center. And we raised like $20,000 over the course of like 4 weeks through this T-shirt. You can actually still buy them on this one website. But that one has stuck for quite a long time while playing in Major League Soccer. Yeah, that's a good one.
Nice.
That's good, dude.
Easy one.
I like it. I need one of those T-shirts now.
Yeah,
it's a cool T-shirt. It's like retro. It's like very 80s, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like 80s, early 90s throwback style. Yeah.
Isn't it like the side profile of you too?
It's like I think it's face on, but one of my. It sells on this website where people can just go buy T-shirts called Cotton Bureau, and it was on their like top 10 seller list. And some people don't even look at what the description of each shirt is. And my friend was in like I don't know where they were, back east somewhere, and this guy was wearing it, and she actually had worked for the Sounders, so she went up. She was like, "I gotta see, like, is this a Sounders fan?" She was like, "Hey, are you a Sounders fan?" And he was just like, "What are you talking about?" And she had just randomly bought the T-shirt. And she was like, "Never mind," and just kind of walked away.
That's
pretty rad.
That's great.
By the way, guys, for this whiteboard, I should probably have a quote on here each time if I do it here.
Yeah, do a quote.
Just thought about that.
Yeah. Do you have a quote now you would like to share, maybe, to kick things off?
No, not particularly.
You should just write the dumbest thing someone says on this podcast every day, every week.
I could draw my variations of Ninja Turtles I used to do in college. My name's Ben Dragavon. I played Major League Soccer for about 64 minutes. Um, let's see. The nickname thing's pretty cool because it takes you back to different phases of your life. So in high school, guys used to call me Drags. Uh, my grandfather actually went by Drag. So it was kind of, I really, really liked that version of the nickname. With a last name like Dragavon, you get lots of different variations. So in college, Drago was the big one. Um, Although I think in Slavic, I think that means the devil. So I don't know if that's a good or bad.
Sounds about right.
Lots of plays off of Dragon. So Dragon Master. You could even go down the road of Dragashlong. That was my AIM name for a while, which now it seems inappropriate. Um, and then when I got on the Sounders in '06, Schmetz called me Benny. Tommy called me Benny. And then the humans that I dated called me Benny as well. My wife calls me Benny. Um, I don't love it.
I've never called you Benny.
I've
Yeah,
never called you Benny either. I call him Mandragon for some reason ever since I met him.
I'm okay with that one.
I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Mandragon. So that's Drago seems to be the most comfortable one. Going back to college days, I think my college coach gave me that one. But any variation of that works.
Mandragon.
My nicknames haven't earned any money for charity or anything like that. Just
You could just have the devil with your face on it, kind of like a devilish face, and maybe
I'm sure people have drawn that.
Maybe.
your missus.
I'm Sean. I got wrangled into this, and we'll talk in a second about why we're here and what the hell we're doing. My nicknames growing up, when you have a single syllable nickname, especially on the soccer field when you're directing people and showing people what's up and what's not, a single syllable nickname like Brad, you can say that really quick. If you're Sebastian, it's going to get shortened down to like Seb or Seba typically because it's just the fastest way to communicate. So I've kind of always been Sean, sometimes Shawnee, or my last name is McCormick, so Shawnee Mac kind of stuck around. But like to your point, James, it is indicative of those periods of your life. I wasn't Shawnee Mac until I worked in radio and got on air. I was in a sales role, but I got on air a couple of times on this local the men's room, and Shawnee Mac stuck. So anybody that calls me Shawnee Mac, it's from this strange period of 8 years where I was working in radio. But yeah, Sean, it's not, you can't really do much with that. It's just is what it is. It's a little vanilla, but my sporting career, I did not play professionally. I played semi-professional soccer for about 63 minutes and recently fell in love with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I'm doing that like 6 days a week now, taking it really seriously. I'm a blue belt. For those of you who know, that's like you're not an idiot anymore. Like you kind of know some stuff. You can hurt people, but you're also kind of a dumbass. So that's where I'm at kind of in my adult sporting career presently. I did get choked unconscious last week. Have you guys ever lost consciousness like being choked?
At home or doing jiu-jitsu?
By design.
That's a yes. Man, that was the first time it's happened. And I was like, I'm fine. And then I was out with my eyes wide open. I was told, and I was out for about 20 seconds until they kind of picked my legs up and started pumping them.
That must have been weird.
It was weird. It was weird. It was fairly uncomfortable for myself and everyone else in the gym. It's just like looking at me like, what?
I've never been choked out, but I remember I went to Europe with this older team. So I was 15, they were 16, and these guys were fucking animals, dude. It's like Andrew Weber, Drago,
Oh yeah,
Andrew Weber.
yeah.
Imagine a whole team of Andrew Webers. These guys are insane. And they were like men at the time. And we went to Europe, and I remember we had a night off, and they were ripping this bong, and then they would inhale, and then they would make each other pass out. and you'd like lay on the bed, and then they'd kind of like cough a fucking smoke out of their mouth and wake up. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
This is not real. That does no
That's
thanks.
wild.
The whole passing out thing, not for me.
Andrew
Not-
Webber and his identical twin,
Yeah.
the worst contestants on The Amazing Race ever.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, those
Oh,
yeah,
now I know the name. Oh, that's
they
funny.
just bickered the whole time.
Disasters.
Oh, that's excellent.
He's a good dude though. He's a really good guy. Nice guy.
So from there, let's go to what the hell are we doing here? I think it's indicative in this first, or important in this first conversation to give sort of a lay of the land, and whether we make this like the intro podcast or not, I think it's important to give some context. So anybody can kind of take it here, but like what are we doing? What are we talking about? And why?
I think, Ben, this is probably like your area of expertise, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but it would be a valuable exercise for everyone to kind of speak about what they think they're doing here anyway, because maybe everyone has a different version, and aligning that and clarity on what we're trying to accomplish. With Athlete Complete, the running narrative with it now is we need to enhance well-being for performance at younger and younger ages, because kids are being exposed to the same stresses that we were as pros, and with no recognition of the stuff that's going to happen on the back end. There's no awareness of what are you actually doing to yourself right now, and how is this going to show up later? What is the cost, and what is the benefit? And I think we're guys that have been through it. A couple guys in here have had a lot of success in what they've done, and they still have shit on the back end we need to talk about. So I think being vulnerable, having conversations about what real life looks like, even though people get snapshots of who you are that aren't real snapshots of who you are as a human, but they just see the good stuff, and we need to talk about the whole picture, good, bad, and indifferent. So that's my why. And I think it would be really interesting. I think people will be engaged in that, and curious, and parents of kids that they're shoving into these sports and shoving into these performance arenas that don't really have awareness of where things are going would want to hear some stuff like that, or should hear stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it goes to should hear stuff like that. I think, Ben, when you asked to jump on the podcast and see if this is something that could work, I think you don't really realize it. I didn't realize it when I was playing, how valuable any lesson that someone can learn from hearing one thing can kind of resonate with either kids or parents. It wasn't until coaching high school soccer afterwards that I realized the impact that I think each one of us can have. And, Sean, obviously you do podcasts quite a bit, and with the Sounders, we have a weekly podcast as well. And the amount of people that do tune in and actually listen and take notes or take ideas of what we're speaking about, I think is invaluable at the end of the day. And if one person listens great and takes something, or if 10,000 do and take something, it can resonate with a lot of people. So that's what interested me in coming on this podcast, and hopefully consistently, right? That's the goal.
Yeah.
And so it's also really cool to be in the presence of guys that are still playing as well, in James and hopefully Marco when he jumps on. And Steve Hauschka's staying with me for a couple of days, and just listening to him and what he's got cooking, kind of in the kitchen as well. He would be a fantastic guest to have on. Mm-hmm. And the perception of when you leave the game is you don't think of it as you're playing the game. You're just kind of in it, and you're anticipating what's next. But then when you leave, you kind of look back and say, I kind of wish I did more. But then you're in the grind at the same time, and you're like, oh, fuck, I can't do anymore. It's this weird dichotomy of the way that your brain thinks. And taking a few minutes to kind of speak about where you're at, I think is going to be awesome, especially for James in going through that process, but also dropping knowledge on the ins and outs of being a professional athlete.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm here to share my experience that I've had, and also learn from these guys I'm almost done with my career. These guys have been retired for a little bit, and I'm getting ready to go through that process, and I'm excited to share my experience and what I've learned with people and, kids, other players, whoever is interested to know kind of what is the lifestyle of, for me, being a Major League Baseball player, kind of what the road is, path is, lessons learned, kind of things that I've had to struggle through. And just, if I can help anyone in any way that I can, I mean, I think this is a great platform to do that. So I'm excited about, what we talk about and people that we can affect, as we go through this.
Yeah, I think
selfishly, Sean, I think learning from other guys in other sports is invaluable too. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not always, it's hard to lean on soccer players because they're kind of going through or have been through the same thing. It's really cool to listen to, a former NFL kicker or a pitcher in baseball. And I think for us as athletes, that's the best thing, is to listen to other athletes as well that are going through a completely different process. The day in, day out of a soccer player is way different than being a baseball player. That's way different than being in the NFL. And using those resources to like push to the next level is something that I don't think is done very often. I think we get stuck kind of in our lane. Obviously, Drago is working with a number of different athletes, and Sean, you work with a bunch of different business leaders and people from different spaces. But I think that is going to be a really cool sort of jump off point to kind of expand our minds and how the athlete actually really does think.
For sure.
That's such a great point. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in too. And with my experience of having a small taste of being in the pro arena as a player, and then being injured and getting that identity ripped away, and then chasing a carrot of, oh, now I'm coaching in the pro arena, and then having that carrot kind of ripped away. And I've been in the medical side in the pro arena and the strength side, and I've been in the youth academy side, and I've seen the development from the kids all the way through. Again, just to revert back, younger and younger ages need to hear our experiences. Parents need to hear our experiences. They need to hear what it's like to be in the thick of it. And yeah, there's loads and loads and loads of positives, but there's loads and loads and loads of sacrifice and cost to all this stuff. That, I mean, I made $34,000 a year at my peak, and I'm 40 years old with 2 kids still dealing with shit. I mean, what did I do? I gave everything I could to get $34,000 before taxes, and now 15 years later, I'm still in my headspace about it and still learning about it and researching, why did I do that? Why do I feel this way? Why am I always constantly battling this and that? And I'm not saying don't go for any of that stuff, because that's not the solution. It's just go into it with your eyes open. That's my thought.
There's like realities, right? It's like the percentages of guys that actually make it all the way and like play like 12 years like you, Brad, or like I've just made 10 years, like I think like in Major League Baseball, like it's a big deal to get to 10 years, like there's not many guys that make it to 10 years of Major League service. I think the average career length is like 2 to 3 years, and then like that's of guys who make it to the big leagues. I think percentages of like guys that actually make it to the big leagues. We just looked at this the other day because the draft's coming up, and out of first rounders, so we're talking like first round draft picks, I think it's like 60 something percent, 66% make it to the big leagues at all. And then someone was saying that, I think, what is it? 50 or 60% make it to like 2 years, but then there's a big drop off at like 4 to 5 years. Like guys, like it's like goes down a lot, big percentage. But I know of like youth players, they used to say it's less than 1%. These kids with a dream, less than 1% of you actually even get to step on a big league stadium in a real game. Like, so there's realities of like, it's a big deal that you just made it to Major League Soccer. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. And like, I have to like, when you make it, Brad, it's like you get so caught up in what you're doing, you don't think about like, it's always what's next, like, oh, I got to be for me, it was when I was young, I was, all right, now I got to be an all-star or like whatever, I got to get that big contract. I got to be one of the guys, one of the superstars. You know what I mean? It's like, you're always pushing for what's next, the bigger, better thing. And it's kind of like that thing where like the next step won't make you happy. It's like, no matter how good you are, I feel like you're never satisfied. You know what I mean? And part of that's what makes guys good is like they keep on pushing, you keep on pushing, but it's also like, all right, let's not be miserable at the same time. You have to like kind of find that balance of like, actually being happy while you're competing. And I think that's a big reason of why we're here, is to deal with the mental health side of things. And like, it's tough, man. Like I talk to guys and it's like, we all have some anxiety about like our sport and like performing, and we all have a hard time. We don't really talk about it much, like there's not much talk about like, oh, how you doing, bro? What locker room is. It's like you're all kind of ribbing each other, making fun, but like no one really gets serious very often about like how you're actually doing.
There's a couple things on that I'd like to touch on, and I think the figures, I'm gonna mess this up, but there's been like 127,000 total Major League Baseball players over the existence of Major League Baseball, and over that time period on the planet, there's been well over 100 billion people. So it's not even remotely close to a 1% thing. It's like a 0.00001% thing. And then someone can check that, but the idea of searching for happy is a tricky concept as well, because human emotions are fleeting. Emotions are there to they're short-lived. They don't endure long. They're letting you know something's up that you need to investigate, or they're letting you know that you like this, and then they kind of go in and out. I think what we're missing, and what I was missing, is the idea of not trying to be happy, but trying to flourish and enjoy the pursuit and have fulfillment in what I'm doing. And those are important differentiators, because happiness is short-term, flourishing is a long-term endeavor that requires hard work and discipline and a lot more sustainable long-term. And I think for me, that was a big missing component. I'm searching for happy, which can be quick hits. Flourishing long-term as humans is what we want to be searching for, and clarifying that. And the idea of flourishing comes with highs and lows, and you can be sad during that phase. Again, fleeting moments, but you need to be able to not carry those emotions with you long term, because they're not meant to be long term.
That's fascinating to me, because what is that line? Like how does it's got to be different for everybody to be performing at a really high level and also being able to like shut that off and rest and sort of step out of that high performance place. Ben, you talk a lot about this term of allostatic load, which is like you're tense because you're either training or recovering and then performing at a level for a game. And at what point do you like stop and smell the roses? At what point do you relax completely to recover so that you can do it again? And I think that's a big part of what we're doing here, is to kind of tease that apart a little bit, because, I think we all know or have at least, conceived of, the elite of the elite, like the, world-class players in different sports. It's like, well, you got to be kind of a maniac, right? You have to be a little neurotic or OCD, or, watch the Beckham documentary or watch The Last Dance, and you learn about how Beckham approached his craft, or how, Michael Jordan would approach his craft. And I think it's interesting because there's not one way to do it. And so having an open dialogue like this to talk about how can you be really good and also flourish in your life outside of your sport. And I obviously don't have the answer to that.
Some guys do it, man. It's amazing. And I don't know if it's just who they are. They're born with it. But there's certain dudes that like are superstars, right? And like they're doing so much. Like I don't know how these guys do it. Like you look at a guy like Mookie Betts, bro. Like that guy's a stud, right? Like he's one of the best ball players in the world. He's got a podcast. He's got charity stuff. He's got this. He's got that. I'm like, bro, like I'm trying to be a big league baseball player and like be a dad at the same time. And he's got kids, and it's like I barely have any energy, any room left to like take anything else on. And this guy's out here doing this and that and all this stuff. Meanwhile, he's like killing it on the baseball field, you know. And it's like, how do you do it, bro? But there's other guys that do it too, like Aaron Judge. You know, I played with him for a bit. He's got a ton going on. Comes to the ballpark, pumps out homers, and then like does all this side stuff, you know. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if there's like a certain mindset that these guys have that like maybe that's part of the reason that they're so good at baseball is because they can kind of like, I don't know, like maybe they can like relax more and like between games kind of thing. Whereas some of us are like, you know, pushing to hang on or like just, you know, white knuckling it the whole time. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's pretty amazing how some players are. It just seems like more relaxed out there about it, whereas some of us are more like, oh my God, we're scared out of our minds out there. Was it like that in soccer too? Could you feel that?
Yeah, I'm thinking like you said superstars, and the guys that can do it consistently and have everything wrapped up in it. And the guys you think of are, right, the Messis, the Ronaldos in soccer, baseball, you know, you just named a few. Tom Brady, right? You think of every sport and all the superstars. LeBron, he's got everything going on. He's buying soccer teams. He's on, you know, doing movies in his free time. There is something to be said about that type of person that can just do it all. And for me, I don't know much about and I would be curious to hear about your background in baseball and kind of how it came to be. But I was, you know, not heavily recruited in college, and my college team I did go to was shit for the first 2 years. And it was always like just hanging on to survive. Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? And it was constantly like that, right? And I got into Major League Soccer, and like Ben was making $11,000 a year my first year. And so it was just constantly scrapping. So there was never that comfortability of being a number one pick. And I think there is something to be said about looking at your bank account and knowing that from the jump you're set either way. So, all right, that part of my life is taken care of from the jump, whether that's a signing bonus early on or it's, you know, you hit a massive contract, a 5-year deal early on. And I think Tom Brady probably grew into that, you know, the better he became. But there are some guys that are from the jump that you just know are going to be great. And I'm not sure if anyone in this room was like that. And I think that is a completely different mindset when it comes to the day in, day out. I think for me, it was always, I felt like I was going to get called into a coach's office and be like, okay, we're trading you because you don't make enough, but we can get a couple good players for you because you're a good player, or we're trading you because you haven't scored in 2 or 3 games. It was always that mindset of, if the coach walked in, I walk the opposite way. And I think for a lot of guys that you're talking about, if the coach walks in, like, they're chilling. Like, I'm the fucking man. Like, I've been the man from the jump, and yeah, go ahead, trade me to another team. Like, I'll do what I do at that team and finish out my contract. It's guaranteed for 5 or 10 years in baseball, some of these guys. And so that pressure is, I don't think, there. So they can really like shift their mindset to, I'm just going to play ball. I'm just going to put the ball in the back of the net. Like, I'm good. I can actually just not even really dwell on soccer, baseball, or football, basketball. I can actually enjoy the process. And
what Brad's talking about intuitively is this word called confidence. And if you actually if you looked at the blood work of someone who has confidence and someone who has anxiety, they're going to look very different. There's going to be hormonal changes, going to be all sorts of different things. So being in the same boat, same-ish boat, where you're like, every year I needed to retry out for a pro team to see if I can make it again. So never being able to switch off and never, like, living anxiety riddled life because I want to make the team, and then getting to a point where I want to make the team, but I'm not making any money. Like, what am I sacrificing here? Was tricky. And James is like, obviously I have intimate details of your life. I mean, your injury path to get back to where you're at. I mean, that's 3 years of your life of, can I do this? Can I do this? You know, it's different, you know, and Mookie has the confidence that he doesn't give a shit. I mean, you know, I'm going to make it here, or I'm going to make it somewhere else, you know, and it sounds like he's doing things off the field that really get his brain stimulated, and he enjoys it too. So, which feeds into the confidence monster that you want. as long as that confidence monster is pre-narcissism, I think that's a great spot to be in.
Yeah, that
I think you
must
know what
be
I'm
a
talking
sweet
about
spot.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
That
and
must
he's a
be.
great dude, man. He's super grounded, like, amazing guy. It just blows my mind what some of these guys can do. And maybe it is just a thing where like you're just so much better than everybody else, and you've always been so much better than everybody else that it's just a different mindset when like you're just that kind of dude, where you've just been like you're a superstar, like a Bryce Harper, like that dude's been a superstar since he was 15 years old. It'd be interesting to know like kind of what that mindset is like.
I mean, even on the female side, like Sue Bird, I mean, has crushed it for 15 years, and in college, and did everything she could off the field to announce herself to the world, and her impact and clothing lines and interviews. Like, this spans not just men's sports, right? It goes into the women as well. I mean, Caitlin Clark right now dealing with whatever as a rookie that you would not expect to deal with as a rookie. I mean, all these things are so impressive to be able to perform, and also just be like, okay, I'm going to block out the noise and just do what I do and do it well.
Yeah.
It's so impressive.
Going back to your point, Ben, about that level of confidence and how that sort of, can develop over time, whether, we all either have kids or work with kids, coach kids. It seems to me that level of pressure starts younger and younger and younger and younger. We hear stories about, Beckham signing his deal with Manchester United at like 8 or 9 years old, which is an outlier situation. Messi for Barcelona, those are outlier situations. But especially in the United States with travel baseball, which a friend of mine has a son who's on a couple of different travel baseball teams, and just hearing about how frequently they practice and the technology that they're using to get velocity for these little pitchers' elbows that these little 11-year-old kids have. And Ben, obviously you've studied this because you work with like elite youth athletes, and they come from all over the country to work with you. This is kind of getting to the crux of some of this stuff, which is, how do you teach a really gifted young athlete how to pump the brakes? Like, how do you tell whether it's 15 or 16, but sometimes now 8 or 9-year-old talented kid, maybe coming up in the sounder system, that has all the attributes, has the talent, has the physicality. Like, how do you even begin to have a conversation around, hey, you got to slow down. You got to go ride bikes with your friends instead of going to, the second practice in the day. Like, how do you even begin to have that conversation?
I think it starts with messaging, and messaging to the parents as well, the adults that are in control of those situations, because obviously they're the drivers of what's going on. And the reality is that these kids are getting exposed to this stuff at such influential ages where their brains are developing, and they're getting feedback from their folks, they're getting feedback from their parents. So like they get such highs from doing this because of the positive responses, and that's getting mapped down, not only the experience, but the contingencies of how they did the experience. So everything they did to lead up to it gets mapped down. So like I have kids that I work with who are stress fractures in their back at age 15, 16, but the only thing they want to do is go play soccer. It's like, well, you need to actually get stronger now. But the contingency in the brain is, well, if I go back and keep playing soccer, then I'll get the feedback that I wanted, the love and adoration and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, you talk about well-being. People have a viewpoint of that. They immediately have their own image. Some people think it's wonky. My argument is that it's going to be, well-being is going to enhance your performance. So the messaging goes back to, you need to not do this to enhance your performance. If you want to get to that next level, you need to reduce stuff. So we're looking at, how are you viewing your body? Your body has all these interrelated systems that respond to all these different stressors, and it has a total cost, and you're maxing it out. So the more you max it out physically, it's going to take away from you cognitively and your ability to focus. You need to do these recovery things. You can't drive a fucking race car redline it, and then just go park it in the garage and go, tomorrow that's going to be fine. You got to take care of the shit that you messed up, while doing that thing. So that's the thing. It's like, it's not just recovering and resting. The way you recover in the modern day is you need to switch your brain off away from what you're doing and go explore other things. It's better for your brain. It's going to give you more output. It's going to make you better at that thing that you want to be better at. That's the tricky part. Understanding that you stepping away from this is going to make that experience of what you want to be better at more positive. So, and the parents are in control of it, but, like their counter arguments are, oh, my 9-year-old's so intrinsically motivated to be a Seattle Sounder or whatever else. It's like, that kid has no clue what's going on. They're just feeding off of you and your desires and what you want that kid to be and what your coach is saying. And Crossfire wants you to have, I should have said Crossfire, but fucking Crossfire, as an A, B, C, D, E, F, and G team. Like, there's no point to that. If you go to Liverpool and their academy system, they have 31 kids at their younger age groups total. Like, they're investing in the completeness of those kids, including picking kids up to and from practice so the parents don't have to do it, including doing wellness check-ins mentally and physically, feeding them, providing the assurance that they have support while keeping a high standard of what they're trying to do. I mean, it's not massive. It's small samples of investment. And that's the messaging, and it has to get through to the parents, I think, first, because especially during times of puberty as well. I mean, kids' brains are just they want everything. And then the thing that gives them the biggest dopaminergic response that lights them up, which could be scoring a goal, which could be mom and dad giving you good feedback. That's what's mapped down really, really hard. And all of a sudden you identify with that. And that's the stuff you have to unpack later.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. As you were speaking, I was kind of thinking back to my experience, like as a youth player, and I was obsessed. I was one of those kids where like I was like the parents were saying, like very like it came from within, but like why did it come from within? I would go. I would train. I would work hard. I was so obsessed with being a baseball player. Because why I started basically was, all my buddies were playing on an all-star team in the summer. I was like 11 years old, and I tried out for the team and got cut. I remember being super upset. I spent that whole summer. There's a park right behind my house where I grew up. My dad was out there with me all summer, and I was throwing like every day, working on stuff. And I went back the next year. I was a lot better, made the team, and like I never stopped after that. Like it was just like go, 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 go. I was, always just baseball. And I just continued working. And I think that like part of it was like you're saying, like I got love and adoration from being good at baseball. I got all this attention, like for those young days, like in high school, what they call me pitcher packs, and I was known for being James the baseball player. And I think like I loved it, like I had something, because like I was kind of like a lonely kid when I was really young, like elementary school. Like I didn't have a ton of friends and stuff like that. And then I started getting good at baseball. I got all this attention, and I put everything into baseball. And I would train, I would work hard and stuff. And I don't really know exactly where to go with that, but it was just like, there's a certain drive within you, but it's like, where does that drive come from? And I think that for me, it's like, it was that recognition, that respect, that I would get from people because I was good at a sport or good at baseball. And even if someone didn't know it, like me knowing it, like helped my confidence, like just as a person, and it just kept on going.
Yeah. I think we look for external adoration, whether we realize it or not, right? In everything that we do. I got really lucky with parents who never played sports and didn't know, like literally did not play sports. I mean, a little bit here and there. My mom was a cheerleader for a hot second in high school, and my stepdad was, an engineer. And so no sports, no one ever said anything other than the only thing they would say after practice is they could see how hard I was working, and that was never a question of how I knew I wasn't that good. So I always worked my ass off. And I realized looking back now is how lucky I was to have parents who wouldn't ask me why I did this play or why I didn't do this or why I didn't do it like someone else. That was they didn't know anything, I don't think, at the time. They just really didn't know anything about soccer. So they were honest with themselves, and they weren't going to coach, and they just provided a safe space for me to just kind of like achieve what I wanted to achieve. You know, you'd have other club teams come knock on the door that were better, but they were 45-minute drives, and they were like, we're not driving 45 minutes out of our night to take you to practice. Like, I don't care what you want to do. Like, we have a life also. And I think that was pretty stoic of them at the time to do that, because I think what you're seeing now, to Ben's point, is you're seeing this overcommitment to every single little piece and every single little advantage. And without me knowing it, it allowed me more time to be with my friends out front skateboarding before practice, which was my like love at the time, was skateboarding. And that like free play of allowing a kid to, you know, live 10 minutes from soccer practice instead of having to leave an hour and 15 minutes early. I could leave 15 minutes. So that extra hour over the course of every year on either side of that was like the most important thing looking back at my childhood.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I didn't do weights. I didn't do extra sessions with a private coach ever. Not once. I just went to practice. And I don't know. I think some of us are born with a certain gift that allows us to, you know, reach that next level. And also luck has a huge part in this whole thing. And who you know is massive. I don't think people realize how lucky some people get. But that's life in general also, and taking advantage of that too. And yeah, your external you know, voices that are out there are sometimes your driver too. Whether for James it was, you know, confidence walking around school, or reading about yourself in a newspaper, or whatever it may be. Like, those things can drive you too, right? There's no difference in reading a newspaper article versus maybe looking at an article on Instagram of someone saying, you know, you're the best pitcher or you're the best midfielder. Right? It's the same.
Am I the only one that is skipping on, or is it skipping
that,
on you guys too?
That feeds us.
Yeah, skipping.
We're losing you a little bit, Brad. I just said we're losing you a little bit. You cut out, so we lost like kind of what you said right there.
Oh, I was saying the external forces, that whether it's, you know, a newspaper article or reading about yourself on Instagram or a blog, it's all the same, no matter what time period it was, whether it was in the 90s or it's now. To me, at least, like we're always looking for that external piece.
And it's tricky now too, to touch on a couple things. Like James talks about his development, and you know, when you go through puberty, you kind of transition from seeking your parents' support and their attention, and it switches to social connection. So if baseball is your big thing, and you're known as James the pitcher, that puts you in a higher social standing, and that's where it gets kind of goofy. And to Brad's point on newspaper clippings, I get lots of newspaper clippings, and it was so stimulating for my brain. Now it's Instagram and whatever else people have at younger and younger ages, and they need it all the time. And like, that's really problematic from an attention standpoint, from everything else, because you're trying to get quick hits of things that everything is glorified now. I need to show everybody, and it doesn't have the same weight, but it is, I think, highly addictive. You know, like, and Brad speaking about his parents, I mean, that's such a cool message, that kind of their lack of understanding or disconnect allowed you to flourish and grow into the person that you are, and have the success that you did. You know, my dad was my coach from age 3, and he took it on because, you know, as an older person, youth soccer wasn't that big a thing in 1987, which is when he took it on. He's like, yeah, I'll try coaching this thing. And then he coached me all the way through high school. And for me, that turned into me, it wasn't resentment towards him, but I didn't want to speak about soccer with him one iota. And there was no reason for it. He didn't do anything. It's just something switched in my brain where if he brought up soccer, I could feel it, and it'd get agitating. And I would not engage. I wouldn't speak to him, which was totally unfair to him. And I don't know why that happened, and I don't think it's unusual. But now that I'm far enough out of the game, it's our closest bond. Like we go to the Sounders games together. Now we talk about it, and being involved with the 50th anniversary stuff, which was huge, and being out in the field. The first thing I did was I went and sat with him, and I was like, I wouldn't have been out there without you.
There's something I think really interesting about that is you said I didn't want to talk to him. After practice is over and you're back home, you don't want to talk about soccer. To me, that's sort of an obvious defense mechanism to protect your allostatic load. You had this internal carburetor that was like, oh, that's probably the wrong car part, that said, okay, I need to now not talk or be or think about my identity as a soccer player. There was a part of you that put up that boundary to probably protect yourself so that you didn't blow a gasket or freak out, right? I mean, you say that wasn't unfair to him, but to me, that sounds like a really effective way that you've sort of found your way into to be able to protect yourself from burnout.
I think that's such a huge message for parents, what both of you guys just said. For Brad, what your parents did, it sounds like it really gave you that safe space, and Ben, your parents sound a lot like my parents, that were so involved in the sport. And, for me, it was when I came home, I didn't want to talk to my parents about baseball either, because it was I wanted to come home, that's my safe space, where you don't have to perform and you finally get to relax, you know what I mean? And Brad, it sounds like you got that, you got to come home and not think about soccer, which is great because that's I think for parents, that's big for them to know, when your kid comes home from their sport, that's where they get to just be a kid, they don't want to have to think about sport, talk about their sport. I think if you do that as a parent, you teach your kid to bring their work home with them, their sport home with them. I think it's so important to be able to come home and leave your sport at the sport. You know what I mean? And there's something to be said. I want to talk about this too with you guys is you have to work your butt off to be a professional athlete. I don't know, Brad, I wanted to ask you, you said that you would just practice at practice, but how did you get to be better than other kids? Were you just better, or did you actually train and work at it? Because I know me, I had to work away from the field at baseball to get better, to then keep on getting better and move past and be one of the best kids playing. So there's a balance, I think, between you have to work extra. If this is something you really want to do, it does take more work. You have to put in more work than the next kid if you want to keep on going. There's something to be said for work ethic, but there's also that healthy balance of just being a kid too.
Yeah, I think for baseball and
I don't know if Brad's frozen or if he can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it not working?
No, you just freezing out a little bit.
Yeah.
So for you, did you start did you work outside of soccer? When did you start doing extra stuff outside of just practice?
I don't know why this is freezing on me, boys. Can you
first time glitches, baby?
Yes,
we gotta get through. We gotta get through the first time stuff.
Just sit it right on top of that router.
Yeah, I'm 3 feet away. So I think for baseball and being a goalkeeper, I think those are pretty hyper-focused positionally. And I think that does require that extra work and extra focus because the numbers are very small for each position. I think the big switch for me was when I started watching soccer, because soccer had come on when I was 13, 14 years old. And none of my friends, we all played soccer because we just enjoyed it. There was no soccer on TV when we were growing up. So there weren't these idols to kind of chase after, right? I mean, I had baseball cards and football cards. That's what I collected. But I didn't identify as a baseball player or a football player. So I didn't have any idols to look up to. I didn't know that there were even professional soccer teams throughout the world or even in this country. It wasn't until 1996 that Major League Soccer came around. And maybe for Ben it's different because the Sounders were ingrained here in Seattle, but growing up in Phoenix, there was no one to reach up to or see that there was a next level. So I think I was playing blind for the better part of my youth career. I'm sure growing up as a baseball player, James, you were able to watch baseball with your family from a young age. And we didn't have that as young soccer players. So I think we were a bit naive and a bit blind to the fact that we had no idea that there was professional soccer, that was a thing. And growing up in Phoenix, there still is only one Division I soccer program. And when I grew up, there was no Division I soccer even for men. And so there wasn't even that next level after high school. And it was a kind of afterthought to think that you could play soccer in college. That didn't come until junior, senior year that I got, actually recruited. So finding those ways to just be caught in the moment and play the sport, I just got really lucky with timing in that respect. There was no one doing private trainings on my soccer team or anyone else. We'd go out and play as friends, but not with a coach. And I just think I grew up in an era of soccer that afforded me that opportunity to just, okay, whatever happens, happens. Like, I know I'm going to work hard, and timing was pretty much everything. I couldn't have done now what I did back then and expected to make the next level.
That's really cool. Yeah, it sounds like a very like healthy, place to be for you, like mentally. It sounded like you kind of had that switch off, which is just really cool. I think there's definitely kids out there that don't get that, and I think like that's such a huge thing, like to be able to like learn from that and your experience, especially I think for parents and families and stuff, to just hear how valuable it was for you to have that, like be able to, because we talk about, at least Ben and I, we talk about how our identity gets so wrapped up in our sport where it's like it's one, and being able to like separate like James the baseball player, and kind of have like those two, keep those things separate. Because I know like early in my relationship with my wife, like I would bring home my sport, all the time, and if I had a good game, things would be going good. If I had a bad game, I'd be miserable, and we'd have a tough time at home. And it took me a long time to be able to like come home and just be me, and not bring my sport home with me and kind of ride that, how's my season going is like how my life is going, so it's like, it's so hard to separate those two things.
I want to pick at that a little bit, James, because I think that's interesting. What did you do? What sort of strategies did you use to be able to leave your performance at the ballpark and just come home and be James? Because I think that's an important. Everybody's going to find their own technique, whether it's breath work or self-talk or whatever, to be able to like quarantine off that performance so that it doesn't bleed into your personal life. But like, what did you do?
Honestly, like when my wife first brought it to me and said, "Hey, this is a problem," like I faked it for a long time. It's just like I shoved it down further. You know what I mean? I don't think it was really till like I started doing therapy that I started like dealing with it. Like, why am I so, upset? Why do I carry this so heavily, within me? And so I started dealing with that. Like, I didn't really like leave it at the ballpark. Like I just like shoved it down further, like for a couple of years there, so that like she wouldn't see it. Like even if I was having a hard time in the field and I did feel like shit, like I had to fake it at home for a while, and like that was tough, But then I actually dealt with it when I got my Tommy John back in 2021. That's when I started like talking to a therapist and like really working through some of my stuff. And I feel like that kind of helped me, feel more confident, just like being James the person instead of having to be James the baseball player. And that helped me separate those two things. And I feel like I've been much happier since. I've also had kids since then, and that really helps. Like you can't like bring your stuff home when you have kids. You know what I mean? Like you're so wrapped up in doing that one thing. It's such a great distraction to come home. And then it's also nice to like come home to somebody who has no idea what you're doing. Like you coming home to a 2-year-old, it's like, bro, they don't care. They just want their dad. Like don't care one bit about what you're doing professionally. They don't know what's
I thought you were
going
talking
on.
about Katie.
Oh, well, her too, like she doesn't really know either. But it was easier to like kind of, when you're not dealing with kids, like you have more time to yourself. Whereas like when it's like coming home to a kid, like you're on, dude, when you get home with a kid. And it was able to like pull me away. And that's been such a valuable thing for me about having kids is it does like pull me away from the sport and give me that space that it sounds like, Brad was able to have. I don't know how that kept on going as your career went on. I know when you're saying when you were a kid, like that was great. Like as you grew up and became a professional, was it the same thing? And for Ben too, like what was your experience like when because you said like you kind of got your cup of coffee in the MLS and, how was that coming home? And I guess for you more so it was like kind of afterwards, like how long did it take you to like be able to separate?
There's a couple things to unpack there. First off, the overworking thing or working extra when you're younger. I used to go to a park by myself and I had a single soccer ball. I would juggle it on the 18. I'd kick it at the goal. If I missed it, I'd run, go get it. And I'd do that for like 2 or 3 hours. And it's no different than like shooting hoops or whatever. It just like, it did the right thing for my brain to keep enjoying it. And when I hit it cleanly, I fucking loved it. Like that was my deal. So the extra work, and I talk to coaches about this all the time. It depends on what it's doing to your brain. Because if you're doing extra training that's forced, it's not going to have the same feedback as if you're going out and playing more. Playing versus training are two extremely different things and experiences for the human psyche. If you're going out and doing extra playing where your brain's free and you get to come up with these scenarios and games and it's like Brad touched on it, free play, that's a totally different thing. Go do it. Like that's okay. But going and doing extra training where you're forced to do it and you're not really motivated to be there, it's not going to be the same thing. I felt like that was an important distinction because you guys talk about it. How did I unpack coming home? I drank. I'd drink. I'd get drunk with buddies. That was my way to do it. And alcohol alcohol by nature is a big alleviator of stress. It's an alleviator of responsibility, whether that responsibility is maintaining this persona that doesn't really align up with your values as who you are as a person or whatever facade I was trying to go through. I've had, since being done playing soccer, I've had college buddies come up to me and say, man, we didn't like you when you played. Because you weren't you were this other thing. And, that hit me pretty hard that whatever I was trying to live up to had no bearing on who I was as an actual person. It was just this thing I was trying to keep up with, and it was fucking exhausting. So drinking was one way to get out of it. That also is a big symptom of having a high allostatic load. So allostatic load is chronic stressors in your system that you just kind of normalize and learn how to tolerate. And it gets to a breaching point where if it's too far, then you need to get help and stuff. How people deal with that, substance abuse, different methodologies, of whatever. But my thing was, I drink. And obviously the way I was living, from a training aspect, I needed to grind and work hard to stay where I was at. Alcohol is obviously not the best recovery tool you can have in the world to continue to grind and do all that stuff. And it just wore me apart mentally and physically. When I was released by the Sounders, Ziggy, that was his thing with me. He's like, when you're good, you belong here. When you're not good, your level drops. We can't have you, kind of deal. And I was always up and down, up and down, up and down. And I say this a lot to kids I work with now. I overachieved by getting into Major League Soccer, but I underachieved when I got there because I didn't change my habits. I didn't change all this stuff because I was addicted to the way I got there, the thing that I got the feedback from, and it was not sustainable. So I'm very vulnerable about my alcohol use. I'm vulnerable about the habits I formed to try and just hang on tight and survive, and how it's just not the way.
I think that's very common, like the drinking side of things. Like, I think like drinking, smoking pot, whatever it is a pretty common thing in sports and professional sports, like finding a way to get away, and shutting your brain off. It's like if you can't do it just like without anything else, you go to a substance, That's why I think like there's a lot of substance use in sports, probably more than people would think, because it's like it helps you get away from your sport.
Yeah. And it's easy.
Yeah.
It's the easiest route of all. I think to your point, Jay, my parents continued to, just be supporters of whatever I wanted to do, and they just never let me quit. That was the only thing.
Hey, Brad.
College team.
Brad, just really quick, dude. Why don't you turn off your camera, and then that'll make the audio better, so you don't lag.
I don't know why this is lagging. It's weird.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, take it from the top.
Yeah. To your point, James, I think, my parents continued to be just supporters, and they just never let me quit, number one. Multiple times, whether it was a 1.6 GPA my freshman year, it was like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to go to ASU and just get a job. They said, no, you're going to see it out. Same with being a professional. It was like, I'm making $11,000 a year and I'm ready to quit and get a job at McDonald's and make more money. And they were like, no, you're going to see it out. And those were the only two pushers that I can really remember. And credit to them for only providing a space that said, you're not going to quit. You have to give it at least a year or two, and then we'll reevaluate after that point. And those are two invaluable pieces. And I think to your point of, providing that comfortable space, that's one thing that I've now realized as a coach of just saying, I want you players to be here for an hour. All I need is for you to not think about anything else and just give me an hour. Like, this is your time throughout, your whole day to just be here and be present. And
Beautiful.
then we'll try and deal with everything afterwards with the tools that we have, albeit, minimal at a high school. And that's where I think that this athlete complete can come into the fold, right? Is with a team like mine, especially, whether it's girls or boys, it's both going to be a big piece for us moving forward, so that, we can accomplish what we need to on the field and be present and not have to think about what's going on at home, what my homework is, what college my parents are pressuring me to get into, whatever it may be. Like, we don't understand what they're going through now. We think we do, but we grew up in a way different era. Whether we think that instant messenger was the same as Instagram is a fallacy, or we think newspaper articles are the same as a TikTok check-in or whatever, and viewing our likes, way different. And being cognizant of those things, and just allowing a space for, my players that I coach to be present and just enjoy what they're doing, and looking back on it fondly, whether they make it professionally or the next level or not, but looking back on it fondly so that they can have hopefully the experience that I had, growing up as a player.
That is beautiful, because you're exactly right that people don't understand the modern world, what these kids are growing up with. I don't understand it. None of us here understand it. It's crazy. And they need that environment that you're providing. It's not only will it enhance the performance of your team, but they need it. They need the experience of getting away from all that stuff. And if coaches are providing an environment that creates fear and stress, which a lot of do, it's just more stuff added onto their plate that they need to just get through. And that's a big problem for performance, is the idea of just getting through stuff. You're not flourishing in that environment. It's another thing I have to take off the box. It's another thing I have to recover from. It's another experience that, with the perception of negativity, your brain's not going to like it. It's not going to give you what you want anyway. So you setting up that foundation, that this is a place where you're present, you can be you and be free. I mean, it's just going to pay dividends at the end of it. It's such a cool thing.
A couple things kind of jump out at me. One is, for the coaches and the parents of high performing youth athletes, it's incumbent on you to assess how you're showing up and how much pressure you're putting on and what sort of side comments you're making around the dinner table, and how you're handling every interaction with the players that you're coaching or with your kids who are playing at a high level. And so that's your shit, coach. That's your shit, dad, mom. And that's tricky, because whether you played at the college level or you probably didn't go pro, because the statistically it's a low probability that anybody made it to that level. But what sort of baggage are you carrying around that you're either consciously or subconsciously passing on to your child who is a standout athlete? So that's one thing that I think is pretty tricky. And I think a lot of people listening to this, if you're the parent or coach of a high performer or a rec league, player, you've got to do some self-assessment about what sort of energy, what sort of terminology you're bringing to every single interaction. That's your shit. That's your shadow work that you've got to do. That's number one. The second point that I was thinking about is, I think for people listening who are brand new to some of these concepts, I think it's really hard to wrap your brain around. I think a lot of people would think this is bullshit, right? The only way to get to an elite level is by pushing harder than everyone else. That's better batting gloves. That's that's the $250 soccer shoes. That's game tape at 12 years old to go over your performance and pick apart all the errors that you made and stuff like that. I think that everybody is thinking this doesn't add up. I can't quite understand this. No, you've got to relax. You got to go skateboard, or you've got to go, have another life outside of your sport. I don't think that people, I can just hear them not on board with this. And so I want to push back, because this is going to be a central theme of the conversations that we're having. So with those 2 points, I want to hear your guys' thoughts.
I have a lot of thoughts, but if anyone else wants to chime in.
I have some thoughts too. I mean, going through, I was a kid who pushed, so I'm coming from a kid who pushed, I always tried to outwork everybody around me. And honestly, I still do. I still try to outwork everyone around me. It's part of the thing that gives me confidence, and I don't think there's anything wrong with working really hard and pushing yourself and putting in the extra practice. If you watch anything about Kobe, he talks about his two-a-days and how he's working so hard and pushing hard on everybody else. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it does take, there is an element where it does take that. But I think that for just speaking to parents, that has to come from the kid. The kid has to want to do that. You can't make your kid do that. You can't turn your kid into a Major League Baseball player, professional soccer player, basketball player, whatever. Because they're never, that kid's not going to make it. And if he does, he's going to be a mess. For me, it came from within, and that's just what I wanted to do, and I pushed so hard, but I didn't do a very good job of separating and having something else. I think what we're trying to say is there's nothing wrong with outworking everybody and doing all these two-a-days, whatever, extra practice. There's nothing wrong with that. And you have to be able to find time to be a kid or, whatever age you are. You have to have that separate space, to recover that. I forget exactly the word, Ben, anesthetic. Am I saying that right?
Nope, but that's it.
Okay. Yeah. that word, you got to drop that load somewhere. You know what I'm saying? You have to find a space to let that go and just be a person, because I think we're talking about mental health here, and, it's important to have that other aspect of your life, because if you're just this stress ball, I think for me, a lot of that stuff, when you're really young, I was able to work through it. I just kept on going. But I think as I got older and I was a professional, I think that a lot of that for me manifested in injuries. My body forced me to take time off.
That's
I think
interesting.
like I pushed, and I would go and I was like, I would go as hard as I could, but then, and I never took that break. I brought it home with me. I was always this like stress ball pushing hard until my body said, nope, I'm going to create an injury here. So you have to, you know, take that time, so that's interesting. I never really thought about that until, right now. But like, I think like that's where a lot of my injuries came from. I had some weird injuries, but it's just like my body's like, all right, I have to create something for you to take some time to relax and recover. Because I don't think I really took that time to recover. Um, so I think that's an important lesson for people.
I think there's an appropriate time. You have to do hard work to get to anything that's fulfilling. Like, so that's a non-negotiable. And the idea is not to give up hard work. You need to do it, but we need to do it with a broader awareness of what the current landscape is now. So performance isn't just on the field anymore. It starts now at school, younger and younger. Now it's social life, younger and younger. It's all these things crashing down on kids at a younger and younger age. Things that we just quite frankly weren't as exposed to. I mean, we were allowed to go outside and play without fear of getting kidnapped and things like that. Like, we weren't locked at our house staring at our screens. We weren't locked, like, we didn't have any of that stuff going on. Like, we were allowed to go let our brains do our stuff, So hard work is a big part of the deal, but now we have to talk about dosage and how much is the right tolerance, right for this kid's tolerance, so we don't blow them out. And then we got to figure out what ages is it appropriate at. I didn't make a top level team until I was 17. I played every sport possible until high school forced me to pick a sport when baseball and soccer were the competing spring season. So I think kids getting to puberty where they can now go, yeah, this is what I want, getting through puberty, I mean, and then they can push it, and then they can start to explore that and really put in the time there. Because at younger and younger ages, they don't know what they want. They're just responding. They're just responding to a parent's feedback. They're responding to a coach's feedback, people they look up to. And how, again, with I don't want to be a social media demon, but you're letting a 12-year-old get exposed to this, not just their small friend network, an entire world of people that are influencing their decisions. They have no idea why. It's a very dangerous, scary situation that's going on right with that stuff. And then you're right, James. Injuries. Because now you're teaching people to blow past check engine lights in their body. They're not paying attention to it because they need to get that identity sorted out. They need to be attached to that thing. And what is the number one problem with injuries? It is a complete attack on your identity now, which does your head in even further. It rips what gives you love and it takes it away. So that's the mental, emotional side of injuries is so tough, right? And a big predictor of re-injury for an ACL is lack of confidence and emotional mood state. It's not the physical side. It's what's going on here first, right? And so, I mean, this is just such a heavy topic, and it's you got to be able to get the reps, but now we have to figure out how to do it when and how, and we're just pushing the gas pedal at younger and younger ages, and it's just not the right time.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not yielding the results that you want. You have youth academies now producing pro players. Well, I'd argue that some of these pro players are glorified cones. I mean, they're practice players for the first team. They're not really making a career. I think they're foregoing college so they can get the jersey, and then they're getting chewed up and tossed out with now what? They're stuck with it. It's overdrive the wrong way, in my opinion.
I just think an important tool that I don't have kids, obviously I just coach, so it's kind of hard for me to say what I would do in any given situation. But I still am a firm believer of, a kid gets picked up from practice or school, and it's the parent's job to say, okay, what's next, right? It isn't to dwell on practice. It isn't to dwell on school per se. It's what's next is what I mean. It's your job now to provide a space that is not creating your kid's identity for them. And if you're going to raise someone, that is your responsibility. So what's next is, okay, we're going to the farmer's market now, or we're going to Discovery Park, or we're going to do something that is externally going to, like, maybe not in the moment, but for a kid to realize, like, when they look back, those are going to be the most pivotal moments that they recognize. They're not going to remember that practice, but they're going to remember what you did afterwards, right? That's going to be a memorable moment. It doesn't have to be every single time, but to me, that's the job of a parent of an athlete. I just think the worst thing that we can do is constantly hyper focus on one thing from a really young age. But I think to all of our points is, at some point, yes, that shift either happens or it doesn't. You're going to have to hyper focus if, you know, the kid is feeling good and maybe coaches are telling you on the side, like, hey, they have potential. There is a shift there for sure, but especially at these young ages is for me, it's what's next after that practice or after school, that you're giving them that space to actually be a kid. And
totally.
I think that's what we mean by free play.
It's the line of questioning as well. It's not like, how many goals did you score at practice today, or
Right.
did your team win?
Did you have fun?
Did you have fun? What'd you learn? What'd you struggle with? How'd you respond to that? Cool. I'm proud of you for taking that on and doing that. Like, that's the messaging, because that's how you're growing a human being. I mean, you're pushing an athlete. You're pushing a human. You break an athlete. You're breaking a human.
They're not an athlete yet.
Agreed. They're human beings developing, and soccer practice is an opportunity for learning skills of resilience if you allow it to be there. If you allow it. If it's win-loss stuff, you're fucked.
Well, and what you're not doing sometimes matters just as much as what you are doing. What you're not saying matters just as much as what you are saying. You know, even a look. You know, my kids just competed in their first jiu-jitsu tournament a couple of weekends ago, and this was their first time. They're 8 and 11. And when I asked them, like, do you guys want to compete? I'm going to compete. Do you guys want to go? They're both like, sure. The level of stress, the level of intensity at a 400 person jiu-jitsu tournament with ages from 3 all the way to 60 and black belts, and it is about as tense an environment as you can possibly imagine. And we were there all day long, and my kids both lost both of their matches, and they both cried afterward because it was just an emotional upwelling afterward. And as soon as they came off, I made sure, and it's sort of innate for me, but I just smiled at them and I said, good job. How do you feel? And it was like, oh my God, it was so intense, or I can't believe it. But they were more focused on the emotional experience rather than the result. Both of them were like, that was really hard. That was really fun. That was absolutely crazy and violent for 3 minutes as we're going through this process. Hugged them, and then we didn't talk about it at all. It was going to be 4 hours until I competed. We just didn't talk about it. We came up, they came up to the grandstands, had some snacks, and I did not say a single thing. And because anything that I would say, they're so hyper focused on, they're so connected to. So I made sure that, like, my posture, my face was calm and chill, like, you know. And then it wasn't until, like, on the drive home, like, we didn't talk about their performance at all. And it wasn't until the drive home where both of them started to open up a little bit about how that was for them. You know, my daughter struggled through 2 intense matches with this other girl who's just an absolute stud, and she was close in both the matches. My son got submitted in the first 8 seconds of his first match, and in the second match, he was leading until the last 10 seconds and eventually lost. But after, on the drive home, is when they started to talk about what that was like and how intense it was and how they performed. And I just listened. And I don't know, Ben, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Reinforce their, you know, I said, I'm really proud of you. I would have been proud if you won. I would have been proud if you lost. But I just gave enough space for them to just have their own experience without, you know, dad trying to program anything.
I'm assuming when you got home, that's when you tapped him out.
Yeah, that's when I put him in arm bars and, you know, said, this is where, yeah.
You exposed him to that.
Exposed him to some submissions.
Yeah, I think the the emotional override, and that's such a high new emotion for them to experience. You just got to let them feel it.
Yeah, right.
I think you did a great job. I mean, that's what, and I don't know. I don't have the perfect answer for how you deal with that, but yeah, it's them engaging and learning how they're feeling about stuff. I mean, that's the stuff right there.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's like you allowed that time, for them to kind of process and almost like level out again after that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it takes some time to like, I know even for me, like, there were certain times when I'd have a bad game, like in the big leagues, right? And like I always would call my parents, after my games because they want to talk, right? And it's kind of, they would call it like a debrief after a game, and sometimes I would hate it, like I didn't want to call and talk about the game, because it's like I just wanted to not think about baseball for a little bit, especially after a bad game. It's like, and as I got older, there were certain times when I was like, look, guys, I can't talk tonight. Like, I'm not ready to talk. Like, I'll call you tomorrow, kind of thing. And like, it's stuff like I know my parents, it's love. The parents you love your kids. Like, we're not telling parents like that you're doing something wrong. Like, we know that you love your kids and that's why you're doing it, but it's also like, you have to, like, we're just teaching like what you should know about like how this is affecting your kid. Like, we know it's all
Mm-hmm.
coming from a place of love, but it's like, talking to your kid about like kind of getting into the nitty gritty of their performance, can be tough, because like they've got coaches for that. You know what I mean? Like your job as a parent, like what I think the job of a parent is like to be that I think I've said this before, like be the safe space, like be that like everything's okay, place for the kid, not have to like relive a tough moment or whatever. And like, if the kid's ready to talk to you about it, like they'll bring it up, if they need your support on something or want to go over a certain play or, an inning in baseball or whatever it is, they'll talk to you about it. They'll bring it to you, kind of thing. I think it was hard for me sometimes when like, it was like, I felt like, all right, I do now in the big leagues, I do my interview after the game. And then I felt like, all right, now I have to do my interview with my parents, where they're like asking me all the questions and I'm saying all these stuff and, they're kind of digging into me. And it's like, that's hard. It takes effort to then like deal with it all. And sometimes you just need some time before you're ready to work through it and deal with it.
And I've sat by Pax's parents at a baseball game that he was not even present for. And he was in the workout room or whatever, but his dad was keeping stats. He had a fucking notebook out doing like, his dad's into it. Yeah. I think
they told me, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Well, to Sean's point about, you're giving your kids emotional reps, right? And if you started a stopwatch from how long it took them to go up and then come back down and then be able to talk about it, and then you gauge it the next time, maybe that time's shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, and that's what they're learning. They're learning how to go, oh, that emotional spike was quick. Now I can talk about it really quick. Like it doesn't sit with you forever now. And now you're not poking at it too and stoking the flames. You're letting them process it, and they're learning how to process it quicker. And James, I'm speaking completely hypothetical here now. Always having your folks to talk to after games, not being able to process it on your own time, it's still something you kind of have to work through. Mm-hmm. It shows up later. So if you keep providing an opportunity, and again, hypothetically, allowing them to learn how to process this stuff quicker and quicker, the relationship with it changes.
Potentially. Like being able to like go to the next thing,
yeah.
Like press that next button, you're
repping it out.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Brad, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just listening, guys.
I want you to turn your mic on and now your shirt's going to be off, or your screen on.
Yeah.
He's red lighting.
Red lighting your balls.
Red lighting my body.
I'll send it over to you. I think that's a sort of a logical place to conclude this first conversation, and we're gonna go with over the course of these episodes, just for people listening, whether this one's pinned to the top of the playlist, we're gonna attack this from all angles. We're gonna tease it apart. We're going to challenge conventional thinking, and we're going to have some really cool guests on. You know, Brad, you said that Steve Hauschka is staying with you right now. For those of you listening, you know, Steve's a all-pro kicker, Super Bowl winner, and an extremely intelligent guy who's super fun and thinks very deeply about sports. And as a kicker, much like a pitcher, it's just you. Like you get an opportunity. It's very isolated. So, you know, obviously we'll have Steve on the podcast, and within the network of you guys, we're going to bring some people on and get some fresh perspectives, because sports are always going to be cool, man. It's always going to be interesting. There's always something to look forward to in, you know, across athletics. It's an important part. It was an important part of all of our lives. And it's such a ubiquitous topic that there's a ton of stuff that we need to talk through and challenge and process a little bit, because ultimately what we're doing here, right, is to sort of open up the box, to have these conversations for coaches, for athletes, so that we can figure this thing out, because we want people to live great lives and to be flourishing, right? Flourishing rather than happy. So any parting words that you guys have before we take this thing home?
I'm just really excited about where this goes. You know, I think, like, as we were talking, I had other thoughts, and I think there's so many more things that we can talk about and cover. And I'm interested to get all of your guys' perspectives, and the guests that we bring on, get their perspectives on different things. I think there's a lot of things that we can address and talk about, and I'm excited about where this goes.
Let's get Mookie. Bring him to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we kind of close, we could sit here for 10 hours and talk about this stuff every single day, but then reminding ourselves that, you know, we have external forces that are, you know, driving us as well, and that's going to be a deep dive for all of us. Is going to be really cool to tap into some stuff that we haven't necessarily talked about. Yes, we think about it, but now actually getting it out there is going to be invaluable. And so just shedding some light on our experiences and how we kind of view things, and everything can be taken with a grain of salt. It's not one extreme or another, but finding that balance. I think this whole podcast is just finding balance.
For sure. I think we talked about 12 topics that could be individual episodes within this episode. I mean, there's some heavy things that we touched on and we just kind of skimmed the surface of. I think this is going to be a really exciting opportunity to share a lot of stuff, you know, and with the disclaimer that we're taking things from our viewpoints and our experiences and putting words to them. I mean, they're not going to be perfect. You know, we're sifting through our thoughts and our emotions, and as we share our stories, we're reflecting on our own experiences and going, "Oh shit, look at that! That made me think about something," and that's beautiful, I think. And hopefully, when people listen to this, they can reflect on their own experiences and go, "Oh shit," and then have just heightened awareness, because that's good. I know this thing's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Especially if Brad could figure out his video.
Definitely. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Mr. Podcast.
Well, I don't ever do video for podcasts.
You don't with Steve?
No, we do it live, or we do it together down at the facility.
Like, what do you mean, like live? Just it's a live
together,
stream?
like in person. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Well, you've got a face for YouTube, Brad. So we definitely want you to keep your camera on.
I have.
We're banking on that, dude.
I've done a million of these. I've never had a problem with internet here. I got to find a way to connect directly to the router. I think I'll figure it out.
Call tech support. All right, fellas, that we still don't have a name. I think the name will reveal itself in time.
Drop a load.
Drop a load.
Dropping loads.
We'll see you guys next time. All right.
All right.
So we'll pause there.
Nice job, guys.
You guys don't leave yet. So I'm going to stop recording.
So he's back.
Yeah, with the big reveal. It's important that you guys leave the software running while it uploads. So if you have a browser or just your laptop or whatever your phone is on, just leave that open. I'm going to stop the record button. I don't know, frankly, if that's going to kill the cameras or kick all of us out. But as soon as I press this button, just leave your browser open while it uploads, and then check back in 5 or 10 minutes, and then we can wrap it up. So I'm going to try
So
that now.
if I'm on my phone, like I won't exit out of it, but can I go do something else on my phone?
No,
I cannot do anything else on my phone.
I don't think I don't think you can. I think, but in my experience, it's taken like 5 minutes to get everything uploaded. But you'll get an alert there in a second to tell you whether or not it's.
It'll tell me when it's done doing its thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So I'm going to click this now, and if it does kick us out, we'll talk and debrief. And if it doesn't kick us out, then we'll take another couple minutes to kind of chit chat. So pressing the button.
Sweet.